Did Kamala Harris prosecute and incarcerate more black people when she served as the district attorney for San Francisco? Now, that's the accusation that's been made against her. Let's look at what really happened. This allegation is largely driven by the notion on the part of some black people that you can't be a fully committed member of the law enforcement community and also be a full member of the black community. That's just complete nonsense. I think we need and we benefit from black people being involved in all phases and all levels of law enforcement, from the police officer on the street to the police chief or the sheriff or the black prosecutor, which many don't understand. It's a very powerful person within the criminal justice system. Black judges, black public defenders. So it's a misnomer, and it's completely a false notion that black people cannot be prosecutors and be also full members and committed members to the black community and to the pursuit of racial justice. Nothing can be further from the truth. I think also this notion is based upon the idea that perhaps Kamala Harris is not a full member of the black community. Let's talk about what her credentials are, such as they may be, in terms of her membership in the black community. Let's start with the fact that her father was from Jamaica. He was also, at the time of her birth, a professor at the University of California, Berkeley. He taught economics. Kamala Harris was born in 1964. She lived in the city of Oakland. She spent her formative years in the city of Oakland. And if you know something about that time, 1964, it was a time when there was a considerable amount of intellectual, civil rights related thought that was happening in that area. This is the home of the Black Panthers. Kamala Harris's parents were full participants and engaged in the civil rights movement right there in Oakland. That was her beginning. That was her nexus. That was the point of her origin. So we can't take that away from her. When she had the choice to attend various different universities, her choice where she would spend the beginning point of her adult life, she chose Howard University. Howard University is a historically black college / university. And while she was at Howard University, she pledged membership with the AKAs. If you know something about the AKAs, that's the oldest black sorority in the United States. And those two things further add to her credentials, if we're checking out her credentials in terms of whether or not she's quote unquote black enough. So we can't take away from the fact that she has this connection initially by birth, by the choice of her parents, but when she becomes an adult, she can go this way, she can go that way. She chooses to further immerse herself in black culture, black learning, black thought at Howard University. And she's chosen to be connected for a lifetime with her membership in the AKA. I think this accusation about Kamala Harris being tough on black people is factually incorrect, but it's also driven by a lack of understanding of what the role of a prosecutor is. Folks, prosecutors are law enforcement officers. Their job is to enforce the law. Now, prosecutors do not go out on the streets and make arrests. In fact, in most cases, they don't even direct law enforcement to make the arrest. They respond to the arrests that are made in terms of whether or not there's a legitimate basis to prosecute or whether or not the charges should be dropped. That's when they get involved. But make no mistake about it, they are law enforcement officers. There are 9,800 plus prosecutors in the United States. The overwhelming majority of these prosecutors are white. When I say the overwhelming majority, I'm talking about 75.3%. 6.7%, 6.9% are Latino or Hispanic, and just 5% of all prosecutors in the United States are black. Now, why is that important? because a black prosecutor and a black female prosecutor is a rare thing. It's a rare person. And what that means is that in many people's eyes, particularly some people, not all people, but some in the law enforcement community, when a black female prosecutor takes the job, there's a thought that they're going to be soft on crime, that they're not going to be committed enough to the objectives and the goals of law enforcement. But then on the other side, there's another kind of pressure that black females as prosecutors, but just black prosecutors in general, but I think it's heightened when you talk about black female prosecutors. There's another pressure that they face, is that they're not going to be loyal enough to the black community, that they're not going to be committed to the pursuit of racial justice. So black prosecutors are under enormous pressure. They're sandwiched on both sides. And this is the context in which Kamala Harris performed her job as the district attorney in San Francisco. Now, she began her career as a line prosecutor. She worked in the office initially in Oakland, and at some point she was asked to come over to the San Francisco office because she did such a great job in the Oakland office. And at some point she decided that she wanted to run for the district attorney job herself, and she ran against her boss in 2003. She was elected in 2004. She served as the district attorney of San Francisco from 2004 to 2011. Now, what's interesting, and this speaks to this notion that somehow Kamala Harris overly zealously prosecuted the black community, something that she ran on should tell us that this simply is not true. She ran on a platform that she would not seek the death penalty for murders. And you got to understand, in the law enforcement community, that is taboo. That is a kiss of death. If you're not going to pursue the death penalty, that suggests to many in the law enforcement community that you're soft on crime. But she ran, nevertheless, on that platform. And her reason for that was that the death penalty was applied in a discriminatory manner, particularly against people of color, especially black people. So she took that position and she was elected in 2003, and she began to serve in 2004. Well, in that same year, there was a tragic shooting of an officer named Isaac Espinosa. Now, everyone knew that she'd taken the position, but then everyone also assumed that she would alter that position because a law enforcement officer was shot and killed by a man by the name of David Hill. She immediately addressed the public. She said that the office would prosecute David Hill to the highest degree of the law. However, she would stand on her position that she would not seek the death penalty, even against David Hill, who had killed a police officer. Now, when she did that, the law enforcement community just completely turned on her and considered her to be a traitor. But not only that, even some of the most liberal Democrats, like Senator Dianne Feinstein, distanced herself from Kamala Harris because she was standing on principle, and she was standing on the principle that the death penalty had been applied in a discriminatory manner against black people. So when black people say Kamala Harris was not for them, I don't think that they know this enormous pressure that she was under, this stance that she took on the basis of principle that was very pro-black. Really, it was just pro-justice. It wasn't pro-black. All of the empirical data seems to suggest that this is the case and was the case, that the death penalty was not applied in an even manner. Well, in 2010, Kamala Harris decided to run for Attorney General, which is the top cop, the top attorney for the state of California. When she ran, the rest of her Democrat colleagues in various different offices won that year in landslide victories. She barely squeaked by. She was barely elected, and the one thing that her opponent used at the time, who was the district attorney for the city of Los Angeles, the one thing that he used to pound her, it was almost successful is the fact that she took this stance against the death penalty, but she won. So I think when we talk about the sum total of who Kamala Harris was, we got to think about the facts, the record. That's in the record. Another thing that speaks to the fact that she didn't just target and prosecute the black community and lock the black community up in a manner that was excessive or an outlier as it relates to other prosecutors is that she implemented a program called Back on Track. When she was the DA of the city of San Francisco, Back on Track gave first-time felony offenders who committed nonviolent crimes, gave them the opportunity to have their felony conviction expunged if they completed certain programs. Some of it involved community service, some of it involved counseling, some of it involved job training, and even some of it involved getting to the heart of the matter. And some of these people committed these crimes. Some of these people were using drugs because they were stressed out. And the response in some cases were to give these people memberships to gyms so that they could work the stress out that way as opposed to resorting to illicit drugs. I don't think that the critics of Kamala Harris, particularly as it relates to her being overly tough on black people, are aware of the Back on Track program that she implemented. A third thing that we can look to show that is the comments of her opponents, the public defenders that litigated against her, the black community activists, not in New York, not in Houston, not in Los Angeles, but the people who were on the ground litigating cases against her in the courtroom on a regular basis, who were marching and protesting and picketing against her policies and her practices. The one thing that they all said, a common thread, was that she gave them a seat at the table, that she treated them with respect and dignity. And even though they vociferously disagreed with her, Kamala Harris gave members of the black community access to her. Their words, not mine. She gave them a seat at the table. She listened to their ideas, even though they didn't always agree, and often they didn't agree, but she treated them with dignity and respect. Their words, not mine. So then the sum total of the matter is this, that Kamala Harris demonstrated a tendency to be what we call a progressive prosecutor, one who worked to address the heart of the matter, not to react to sensational crimes that were being committed, but to look to permanent solutions. She was that, and on balance, we can say that she was and continues to be a friend of the black community and all other marginalized communities.